Hello, I'm going to be describing how my Moore machine works, and this is the state diagram for it. So I have a initial state right here where it'll be when the start charging is off. So basically it's not in a charging session is how I assume that to be. And then when it turns on, this like start charging becomes a 1. It'll either jump to state 2 where it isn't charging because it has a temperature warning already. So that's if it's initially starting overheated for whatever reason that may be. Or it can go just to regular charging without any warnings. This is where it'll be after it first turns on. And then it also can proceed from here to state 2 if you get a temperature warning in this state. It'll proceed to state 2 where it's not charging and it's cooling off. And then if the warning goes away, it'll move to state 3 where it's charging after having its first warning. And then after having its first warning, if it has another one, it'll stop charging again and remain there until the warning goes away. And then it'll move into state 5 where it is charging after having 2 warnings, and it'll remain there until it gets another warning, and in that case it'll move to state 6 where it's in lockdown and the error is now active, and there is no way for it to, it'll just keep looping in this state, and there's no way for it to go back to state 0 by like turning off the start charging like all the other ones. So if start charging turns off at any point before state 6, it'll return back to state 0, and it'll recount all of the temperature warnings after then in that event. And this is the schematic for this design. Oops. It includes 3 flip-flops, and I made 4 logic blocks just to make it a little cleaner. It just has all of the necessary logic that goes into the flip-flops. Makes it look clean. And then I also noticed from the kernel maps that the output of charge on is the same as the logic needed for making the Q2 flip-flop data. So I could take this logic block and just run the output straight to charge on, and that made it a lot more simpler than the melee design. And then the waveform looks something like this. What it does is it counts the amount of temperature warnings within a charging session. So once charging is turned on, it'll count however many warnings you get. And you can see that here charging turns on, so it turns on the charging, but then it hits a temperature warning and it turns the charging off. And then once the warning goes away, it turns it back on. Another warning, turns it off. Warning goes away, turns it on. Another warning, and then that is the third temperature warning. So it enters the lockdown, the safety lockdown, and remains there regardless of the temperature warnings until I reset it, and then it starts again. Right here, the error turns off, and then it'll turn the charging back on, and then off, on, depending on the temperature warnings. So it works again after a reset. And here I wanted to show what happens when you have one of these scenarios where it's the charging turns off. And in that case, what I assumed was that 3 temperature warnings in a row meant 3 warnings within a session, a charging session. So if the charging ever turns off, then it'll restart the count of warnings. So that's what happens here. You have charging turns on, you have 1 warning, turns off, the warning turns off, so it charges again, another warning, it's counting those. But then I stopped the charging session, so then it had to recount again. So it counts the 3 after the charging has been consistently on, counts the 3, and then it turns off or goes into safety lockdown once it hits the 3 after I have the session restarted. So enters lockdown, and yeah, that's how the More machine works. Thank you.